Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone tuning in wherever you are, or for anyone watching a recording of this. Thank you for joining us for today's live online webinar, Learning Photoshop Layers and Selections with author and photographer Glyn Dewis. We're going to be getting started in just a few minutes. We have quite a few people registered, so we're going to give all of them some time to join and get settled. In the meantime, feel free to tell us in the chat your name and where you're tuning in from. We've got a lot of international folks so far. We've got another Glyn from Ottawa, Canada. Hi, Glyn. Welcome, everyone. If you're just joining and you're here for our live online webinar, Learning Photoshop Layers and Selections, you've come to the right place. We're going to be getting started in just a minute. In the meantime, please feel free to share your name and the place that you're attending from. All right, it's been a few minutes. We're going to get started. We have some other participants who may be joining us while we're in progress, but don't worry. For those of you who have to head out early or anyone who comes in late, we will be emailing all who registered the recording to this video. Also, if you do have questions for Glyn during his demonstration, please enter those into the Q&A, and I will be moderating those at the end. So to get started, my name is Katie Walker, and I'm the marketing coordinator at Rocky Nook. It is my pleasure to welcome you all and host this webinar today. We have around 700 people registered for this. So for those of you who are new to Rocky Nook, we are a small independent publishing company out of San Rafael, California. We have the goal of helping photographers of all skill levels improve their ability to capture those moments that matter. Recently, we have taken our passion for creativity and of making finely crafted books and started applying it to other artistic endeavors, namely publishing books on drawing, painting, graphic design, crafts, and much more. We are delighted to welcome Glyn as we promote his newly published book, The Photoshop Layers and Selections Workshop, which is available now and which we will share a link to purchase in the chat with a coupon to apply at checkout for 40% off. We ask that if you buy Glyn's book, that you leave him a review through whichever avenue you purchase from, as this helps both us as the publisher and Glyn as the author. So now to welcome Glyn. Glyn Dewis is a photographer, educator, speaker, and best-selling author based in Devon, UK. A Photoshop World Dream Team instructor, Kelby One instructor, Sony Alpha creator, West Coast Top Pro, and in 2017, Glyn was awarded Adobe Max Master following his presentations in Las Vegas of that year. Glyn regularly presents at events around the world, covering all aspects of photography and post-production. Founder of the 39 to 45 World War II Veterans Portraits Project, Glyn is also ambassador of the Veterans Charity, an immediate needs charity for veterans who face hardship and distress. You can see Glyn's work at glyndewis.com, on his YouTube channel at youtube.com/Glyn Dewis, and at Glyn Dewis on social media platforms. Please join me now in welcoming Glyn. And Glyn, please feel free to take it away.
That was like waiting for the curtain opening moment, wasn't it? When you come on stage. Hello, everybody. Oh, lovely. Thank you so much for the introduction there, Katie. It's wonderful. Whoever this bloke is, I definitely want to tune into it. And also thank you to Rocky Nook in general for hosting this. Rocky Nook, if you've got my book and you know anything about me whatsoever, you'll know that Rocky Nook have been my publishers for a few years now. And they don't know I'm going to say this, but you know, there is no other publisher I'd want to work with, because what I love about Rocky Nook is that when you write a book, they kind of leave all the ums and ahs in. Do you know what I mean? So that when you do actually read it, if you know the person who's written that book, when you read it, you can recognize that they wrote it, as opposed to being some kind of like generic kind of type on paper. And you know, you buy into a personality, I think. And you know, there's lots of people out there teaching Photoshop, and I just think it's wonderful that some people will tune into the stuff that I teach and also buy the book. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rocky Nook, for hosting this as well. So yeah, we're going to have a quick dive into some of the stuff that's in the book. There's also something outside of the book that I want to show you. But talking of the book, when it got published, obviously with all the delays in absolutely everything that we've experienced over the world over the last 2 years, there was an update. We had Adobe Max happened. Adobe in their wisdom kind of released some incredible updates, which kind of came after the book had been, you know, written and what have you. I have now done an update. For those of you who've got the book or going to get the book, there will be an update, because that is one of the questions that we do get, is the new stuff in there. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly drag this over. The way that you get the update, let's just put that there. You can guys see that there. The way that you get the update is you can go to the Rocky Nook website and you'll be able to download the PDF in there. And the PDF here is the one that I've written. I think it's been spell checked and stuff, so don't be too hard on me. But this kind of covers the new stuff that would be in Camera Raw, which is also, as you know, going to be in Lightroom as well, for those of you who are Lightroom users. So that's just to let you know of that. But yeah, let's just kind of dive in. Let me share my screen. Come over to here. We don't need any sound. You've got sound on me already, no videos to show you. So I'm kind of hoping that you can see my screen. I'm going to rely on Katie here to say that if you can't, but I'm guessing now you can see my screen with a picture of a female surfer. So when I actually did this picture originally, I didn't have the new updates. So I had to do all this kind of stuff manually to boost the colors and all that kind of stuff. So what I want to do, hand in hand with the PDF that you can download as an update, I just want to quickly show you now how I would approach the retouch on this picture with the new updates, because those new updates is all about very quickly and intelligently making selections. It's kind of taking the hard work from us. They're not perfect. You know, there's still a bit of work to kind of come with those. However, I think, you know, with Adobe releasing them, you know, such a short time ago, it's incredibly encouraging how their kind of technology is improving. So let me just show you. So this is the picture that needs a bit of work doing on it. I've got just one layer in the layers panel. Let me just duplicate it, because I want to kind of do the update to this and then show you the before and after. So we've got that there. We'll then just dive over to the filter menu and we'll go into the Camera Raw filter. Now, I've got to say, I think Camera Raw, when that was allowed to be used as a filter at any stage in the retouching, I think that was one of the biggest things to ever happen to Photoshop, just like this new update is now. Since then, this is the next best, biggest thing to have ever happened with all these masks and what have you. So here we are then, Camera Raw. Let's say that we want to boost this color in the sky and also give the sea a bit of life, because I mean, I was there doing this picture and I know that it was definitely a bit more blue than what we can see now. So we're going to come over to the right-hand side of the screen. I'm going to try and zoom in so hopefully you can see this. But here we have the new masking kind of facility within Camera Raw, which is obviously, again, also in Lightroom. Now, if I click on that, we get a number of options available to us. And we've got loads of things like selecting the subject, selecting the sky, and what have you. Let me just quickly show you a workflow about how you can use these. First of all, I want to make the sky a bit better. So what I'll do is I'll just simply click on Select Sky. Now, I just think that's amazing how quick it can kind of say, right, well, there's your sky. Now, you can see it's got this red overlay on it. If you are working with an image where the sky was, you know, like they say, red sky at night, shepherd's delight, when it's beautiful, you know, bright, so colorful sky, and you wanted to work on the sky, a red overlay might not be what you want because it wouldn't be very visible. But you can come in and change the color of that overlay if you want. So it's incredibly flexible. But the thing is, at the moment, from what I can tell you can see the shine has gone off our subject's face here, which means that the selection of the sky is also including the selection, a bit of our model as well, sorry, our surfer. So what I can do is I can actually come over now and click on subtract, and I can say, right, subtract the subject. And when I do that, it'll then go, right, let's have a quick look. And you can see now, look, there's a bit of life back in her face. So now I can start to say, right, well, there you go. Sky is selected as quick as that. Let's just give it a bit of a boost. So let's just say a bit more blue into the sky on the temperature. We'll just do it nice and simple. And maybe as well, let's come down here, a little bit of dehaze, so we can bring back a little bit more detail on it. So very, very quickly working on the sky. So that was just simple. Select sky, remove the subject. Let's now look at how we could maybe approach working on the sea, to bring back a bit of life in there. Loads of ways you could do it, but this is just, again, one way. So I'm going to click on create a new mask. When we click on create a new mask, I can then choose what kind of tool I want to create that mask. So I'll say, let's go for a linear gradient. So what I can do now is click down and drag upwards, and you can see that red overlay. If I hold down the shift key, it'll make it easier to keep it in a dead straight line there. So I'm going to go way up just so that I don't miss the bit right in the distance. I'm going to actually go way above the horizon line. So we'll go to maybe somewhere around about there. So now that we've got the initial selection laid down, let's remove the bits that we don't want on it so that we can then only work on the sea itself. So what can we do here? Well, first of all, let's get it out of the sky. So we'll just click on subtract, and we'll say sky. And then very quickly, it'll go, voila, bang, done. It's like, it just amazes me how quick it's able to do that. It's also on our subject. You can see it on her hands down here. So let's just get rid of that. So again, we can click on subtract, and we can do add and subtract as many times as we want. So I'll do, okay, get rid of the subject in that C selection. You can see now, look, it's gone off her hands. But now we want to remove it off the surfboard. Okay, I want to try and get that red overlay off the surfboard so that when I bring a bit of color into the sea there, it's not going to affect that as well. So we'll say subtract again. This time I'm going to choose one called color range. So we click on color range, and then what I need to do then is just bring my cursor over into the picture, and I can click on any part of the actual surfboard. So let me just click on, say, this bit right on the top just here, first of all. Now, when I do that, you'll see straight away, it will remove the color across the whole of that board that's very similar to what I clicked directly on top of. And you can see just there. Now, we've also got this refine slider. Again, let's just zoom in, this little refine slider here. I can now move that left and right to add or subtract from that color range. So let's just see now, if I drag it to the right, it's going to include even more. And if I take it to the left, hopefully you can see on your screens there that if I go far left, it kind of brings back some of the overlay on top of the board. If I take it to the far right, it takes it off even more. So that's looking good. Maybe just a little bit on the front of it needs to go as well. So I'll just click on subtract. I'll do another color range, and I'll click on the front of the surfboard just there to take that off. And again, I can play around with that refine slider. So that's looking good. Now we can make a few changes to it. So let's have a look here. Temperature. Let's just bring some nice blue back into the sea just there. I just think it's amazing. I'm talking to you while I'm doing this, explaining it. But if you think about what we're doing there, it's just literally click, 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 bang, and we're done. It just amazes me how this technology now is enabling us to do this kind of stuff, because ordinarily, think about how we would have had to select that and refine it. And yeah, could have been a lot of work. Let's just click OK, send this now into Photoshop. So you can see now very quickly, without the talking, we can go from something like that to that. And that there is definitely much more like what it was on the day that I was in the sea, chest high, with an A7R4 camera, not in a waterproof case, about 1 inch above the water. I'll never do that again, but I got the shot. Whatever you do for the shot. Something completely unrelated. Let me just show you this, because you might not have seen this. While we're there, let's just quickly dive into filter, and we'll go to neural filters. I just want to quickly show you this because I think it'd be a waste not to. Let me just zoom in on our surfer just here. If you've never played around with these, which is nothing to do with the book, if you've never played around with them, give them a dive in, because these ones here, we've got ones that are fully featured, And we've got ones that are kind of like in test. This smart portrait one here, I just love this because I didn't want the female surfer to be looking at the camera. I wanted that meaningful, distant gaze past the camera. But this was the only shot we were able to do. Very tricky, difficult situation working in. What I can actually do here with this smart portrait is take the eye direction and drag the eyes to the left or to the right. So let's just take it to the left. You'll see down here now, hopefully, you can see this little progress bar zipping along. What's happening now is this picture is being sent up to the cloud. Some fairies are looking at it, looking for similar pictures, similar eye shapes and what have you. And it's going to go, right, so you want eyes that are going that way? Right, there you go. I mean, look at that. I hope you can see that. But I mean, that's just mad. Her eyes are now gone. In fact, let's just send that back into the normal workspace. So we can go from, let's just zoom in a touch. We can go from that to that. I just think that's crazy. It's just so clever. Really, really clever. And this is what I like about the retouching here. We're not doing stuff that is completely and utterly, changing a photograph. We're making the picture how, first of all, colorful wise it was at the time. And then we're just using that little bit of things in Photoshop that make the subject look the way that we wanted them to, because it was not possible during the time of the photo shoot. Okay, bit of a contentious issue. Maybe some people don't believe that's the right thing to do, but hey, if you don't tell anybody, they don't know. But then I've just told you. Right, so that's that one there. Let's just close that one down. Something else that came in the updates was, let's have a look here. This is a thing called Object Finder. And again, this is all using that artificial intelligence, that Adobe Sensei technology to be able to kind of help us as the end user to make selections really quickly. Because let's face it, unless you've got some kind of perverse fascination with selections like I have, you don't really want to be doing them. You want to get on with the creative side of things, not having to make intricate selections. Well, this technology really is coming on, because let's just say that I wanted to select this Welsh sheep farmer here and his dog. You could take a bit of work, but let's just quickly show you here. If I come to where we would find the quick selection tool in the toolbar, where we've got the magic wand, commonly called the tragic wand, we've got the quick selection tool there, or we've got this object selection tool. This is fantastic. And again, this is all kind of covered. This object selection tool is covered in the book, but something new that's been updated in this is in the options bar at the top of the screen. If I just zoom in on that, hopefully again, you can see as I zoom in on this, we've got a little checkbox here that's called Object Finder. So it's a little checkbox that you can turn on or off. And you've got this little kind of refresh icon, and then you've got this little icon here. Let me just show you what those are. Because now that the Object Finder is ticked, I can bring my cursor now over onto the subjects. I mean, look at that. It's telling you that's one subject, that's another subject. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to make you a perfect selection straight away, but it's going to get the majority of the work done. It's going to get you the majority of the way there. And then all you need to do is kind of finesse it. But when you put your cursor over it, like that's individual subjects. If you want to have all of the subjects visible at one time, that's that little icon at the top of the screen that's like a square. You can click on that and it'll say, right, there you go, there's your subjects. I just think that's incredible. And if you've got them there, if you want to, when you put your cursor over it and you see it highlighted like that, if you want to get those marching ants around it to be able to do your alterations or your cutouts and whatever, all you need to do is just click down on it. And you can see there, look, it's done it. I mean, that I find just incredible. So you can see just by, open that image up, it goes up to the cloud automatically with that little tick in the checkbox there for the object finder. Adobe Sensei looks at it and goes, right, I reckon that's a subject, and I reckon that's a subject. Let's send it back down and help him out. I mean, I just find that incredible. And you can see here, look, it's not perfect. I mean, selections works on contrast and tone and what have you. And this brick wall here is very, very similar to his clothing. So it comes on great down here where the contrast is very, very different between him and the background. Here, it's a little bit off. We can't expect miracles, but this has certainly done, a lot of the hard work for us that we can then dive in and kind of finesse. So that's that. That's one thing I wanted to show you there. Again, all in that PDF that you can get. When you got the book, you can download the update. Right, let's just double click on the hand tool to get rid of that. And we'll get rid of that selection just there. Right, something else I wanted to show you was, let's just close these images down. It's always good to have as fewer images open in Photoshop as you can so it doesn't drain on the resources. But let's get this fine fellow up here. You might recognize him. In fact, I think since this was taken, this here has gone a little bit grayer. But hey, there you go. If only we could use Photoshop in real life. Right. So if I want to just show you one way that we can tidy up selections, because sometimes what you might encounter when you make selections in Photoshop is a thing called a halo. Now, with something like this, you'd expect it to be very, very easy to do a cutout. I mean, if Photoshop can pick up a Welsh sheep farmer against a brick wall, it can certainly pick up a Glyn against a grey background or a light grey background. One way you could do it is you could just go to select and select subject. And you can see here straight away, yeah, no problems whatsoever with that. But let's just say that when we do this, let's have a look at this cutout here. You end up with something like this. Hopefully you can see it. This little bit of a halo going around the subject just there. Now that halo there is the background, the original background where the selection has been made around the subject, but it's kind of not gone tight enough onto the subject to be able to remove that halo. Now, what I used to do before knowing the better way of doing things was if I had a layer mask, I would just get a black brush and I would spend forever just going around the whole subject trying to remove this halo. We don't need to do that, thankfully. Here's one way that we can actually get rid of it. I'm clicking on the layer mask. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the filter menu and choose other, and I'm going to choose minimum. Now, when I click on minimum, this is what happens here. I'm going to put my cursor so you can see that's the shoulder bit there. So the black is what we don't see. The white is what we do see. So watch what happens. We've got this radius slide at the bottom. The minimum you can go to is 0.2, but we can still see that halo. So what I would do is I can slowly start to increase that radius. And you can see now, look, there you go. So that's before. And if I just bring it up a little bit, you can see that's after. And I can press down on here. You can just, if I click on this little black and white preview in the minimum properties area here, if you click down and look at it just really intensely, you can see that it's moving. So what happens is by me moving that radius slider ever so slowly, that makes the black part of the layer mask start to grow. And as it grows, it just covers over that fringing. And that's why we want to do it nice and slowly, because you only just want to cover it. You don't want to go like crazy so it completely covers it. You're also at the bottom here, you've got this little thing called preserve, and you've got the options of roundness or squareness. Now that's really useful. It's definitely one to keep an eye on, because if you've got a subject like something organic like me here, you know, where we've got very rarely do you have perfectly straight lines. Everything's got like a little bit of a shape to it. You would want to use the roundness. Now, if I was trying to get rid of the halo on something that was very angular, I would maybe choose squareness, because that's not going to try to make that removal of or that growth of the black. It's going to make it very angular, and that'll follow the shape of the subject. All right, so that's there. A lot quicker than just getting a black brush and kind of painting around. That's not what you want to do. So that's minimum. You go to the filter menu, choose other, and choose minimum. And conversely on that, if you wanted to make it a little bit bigger because maybe your selection had gone too far in, you could use the maximum slider. Exactly the same thing, but the opposite. Just take the slider, it'll make the white grow. So that covers over the black areas, if that makes sense. Right, so that's that one there then. So let's have a look here. So we've got object finder, halo. Right, now, let me show you, we might come back to that one, but I want to just show you just another couple of ways that we can do some cutouts. Now, this is an image that I had used this one quite a bit, because although it's a tree, you don't necessarily have to think that the technique I'm using now is only going to work if I'm cutting out a tree, because what we have here is a subject that's got a lot of detail, all right, a heck of a lot of detail with those branches and the leaves. So this could quite happily be a head with hair on it. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is just because using a technique on one thing doesn't mean to say you can't use it on something else. And that's kind of what I'd encourage you to do as well, is approach Photoshop and you're retouching with the kind of mentality of what would happen if. Now, what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I did that? You can't break it, hopefully. So just experiment with it. But here's just a couple of ways that you could maybe look at cutting out this tree here, because it's quite a simple background. But this is how you can do it. Right, over in the layers panel, we've got just the one layer, which is this tree. I'm going to first of all click on the padlock icon just to unlock that particular layer. Then where it says layer 0, I'm going to put my cursor just to the side of that in the blank area and double click. And when I do that, it brings up the layer style properties here with these blend if sliders. And these blend if sliders, if you've never experimented with these, I would highly recommend you do. I mean, they're incredibly powerful. You've got two of them. We're only going to bother with one. One of them's called this layer. The other one is called underlying layer. Now, we've only got one layer open, so we're just going to use the slider called this layer. So I want to get rid of the blue. Let's just see if we can remove the blue sky to then put a new sky into place. So where it says blend if, and again, let me just see if I can zoom in on this just to show you. So where it says blend if, you can see it says gray. But if I click on that down arrow there, which doesn't work when you're zooming in, but just take my word for it. When I click on that down arrow, it gives me a choice of red, green, or blue. Now I'm going to choose blue because that's what the sky is predominantly made of. So now look, if I've got this slider, we've got the dark side and we've got the really blue vibrant side. If I take the blue vibrant side and slowly start to drag it, as I'm moving this, keep an eye on the sky in this scene here. It's quite a big dialog box that, but let me just drag it over to the left. And as I do, can you start to see now those transparent pixels? It's kind of like, the pixels are disappearing rather, so you can get that transparency behind it. You can take it so far and all of a sudden disappeared. It's completely gone. So we've still maintained the green ground. We've got the tree, we've got the branches, we've got the leaves. Absolutely fantastic. Now you might find that when you use this technique for cutting out, because this is just another technique that you've got there that you can put into your Photoshop toolbox, if you like, you might find that when you do it initially, that the edges around the object that's now just staying there with no background behind it, they might look a little bit too sharp and just a little bit obvious what you've done there. So what you can also do to help with this in this, the blend if sliders, you've got that little slider that we've moved there. If you're using a Mac, if you hold down the Option key, or if you're on Windows, hold down the Alt key, just click on that little dial here that you've moved and split it into two. And when you kind of separate the two of them just a little bit, that softens the outline of the remaining parts of the actual picture so that it's not quite so obvious. All right, so that's that just there. Now that we've got that, in fact, I'll need to do a little bit better. Just at the top here, I can still see that sky just there. So we'll go for something like that. So now then, let's just say we'll put the other sky in. Let's go File and we'll go Place. I've got another sky that I'll put in. And just on the note of that as well, you'll notice that the sky I'm putting in here is still, it is still quite a bright kind of sky, very similar in tone to what we originally had. And that's quite important when it comes to doing selections. Now, when we're making selections and cutouts, we can't expect really to be cutting something out of a background, putting it into a completely different brightness value and expecting it to look perfect straight away. We're still going to have to work on it. Ideally, when you do a cutout, you want to put it into a similar kind of background, either a dark or a light background. Not the color I'm talking about here, but the brightness value. So now that we've got that in, let's just say now that we've got this new sky in, I wanted to change the brightness now of the tree. I want to play around with that. So what I would do, as an example, I'll click to add a levels adjustment layer. If I just leave it as it is at the moment, that's going to make everything go brighter. The tree, the sky, the lot. I only want to brighten this tree up here. So what I will do is I'll click on this little icon just here, which is called a clipping mask. Okay. And what that's going to do is going to restrict any of the adjustments I now make to only affect the layer directly below. And the layer directly below is only the tree. There are other ones below that, but the one that's directly below is just a tree. So I'll just click on that icon. You can see now that that kind of adjustment layer moves across. It's got a down arrow. So now what I'll do is I'll get this adjustment. Let's just say I want to play around with it like so. So I'm going to brighten the sky or brighten the tree or darken the tree. But can you notice that when I'm doing that now, it's all going a bit funny in the sky again? And that's because I'm changing the luminosity value of the original image. And that's now kind of making the background the original background show through, because that's how the blend if sliders worked. It's like, what on earth what am I going to do here? That's not working. However, all is not lost because it's a real simple fix. All I need to do is this: click on the layer containing the tree. Then I'll go to the filter menu and choose convert for smart filters. Now, when I do this, keep an eye on the thumbnail of the tree in the layers panel, if you can see it. At the moment, the thumbnail is the original scene, the foreground, the tree, and the sky. But watch this. When I click on convert for smart filters, look at the thumbnail now. It's gone transparent. And in fact, now look, when I go to make some adjustments of the brightness or darkness of the tree, doing this, the sky is unaffected. So that's one way that we can play around with that, just to kind of use a blend if slider. In fact, I'm not even using really a cutout tool or whatever. I'm just using a slider to remove a certain color at a certain brightness value away from my picture so that I can put a new background in. Just incredible. This is what I love about Photoshop, is that there isn't just one tool for doing a specific task. Again, it's that what would happen if mentality when we're approaching Photoshop, that we just never know, that if you just experiment, you know, it's amazing the things that you can find out. So that's that just there. Something else I just wanted to quickly show you as well, for those of you who are maybe new to doing cutouts, I want to just quickly show you something that a lot of us now take for granted in knowing. Let me just revert this picture back to normal. So I'm going to go to the file menu and we'll choose revert. So that'll take me back to the original image. Let's look at another way that we could maybe look at cutting this out, because let's just say that the other way just didn't work. We now need to look at an alternative. Now, one way that we could also maybe look at doing this is going to the select menu and choosing color range. And color range has been in Photoshop since Photoshop. I mean, it's been around for absolute years, you know, but it is, although it's considered quite basic, it is actually quite powerful. So what I'm going to do now is make a selection of the tree by dragging over with my cursor to tell Photoshop what kind of color I want it to include in my selection. So we've got this real basic representation in the color range properties here, just a black and white thing here. But what I'll do is I'll come to the samplers here, click on the plus, and I'll click down on my tree and I'll drag around. And as I do, you can see that it kind of picks up on the tree just here. Can you see how it's kind of, let's just go, in fact, let's just try different areas. As I click around the image, you'll see that different parts are selected. But let's just say I'm going to click on the tree, and then we'll take, oh, that's not working very well, is it? Let's come back out of there. Let's go select, and we'll go to color range, and we'll just click on the tree. There we go. Right. So now then, I've clicked down on the tree. We can see that this now, the white areas in this little properties area here now are saying, look, where you click down, this is where all those similar colors are. Now, that's obviously not enough. It's not including the whole of the tree. So what I can now do is use this slider here called fuzziness. A bit of a weird name, but if I drag it to the right, it'll start to include more, it'll kind of give more colors within that original selected area. So let's go for something like, say, there. It's very difficult to see exactly what you've got with this being such a small dialogue, but we'll go for something like that and we'll click OK. Now, when we do that, Photoshop goes completely crazy and we can see all these marching ants all over it. We only really want the tree, but we've got the ground here selected as well. So what I'll do is I'll get rid of that. Let me just choose something like my lasso tool, and I'm going to hold down the Option key on Mac or Alt key on Windows. That removes a selection, and then I'll click and drag around to say, look, I don't want all of this in the bottom. And you can see now, look, marching ants have gone. It's only left on the tree. Now that we've got the marching ants, I will then click to add a layer mask to cut it out. And you can see straight away, it doesn't look that good. In fact, let's have a look at the actual layer mask itself. You can see that it's more a mixture of different tones and brightness values of gray, really. It's not pure white and pure black, but we can tidy that up very simply. Let me just get a brush, a normal, soft, round brush. And what I will do is ordinarily would have it maybe set to the normal blend mode. I want to make sure that certain areas are black and certain areas are white. So let me paint on the tree first of all. I'll use a brush with a white foreground color and I'll start to paint. And you can imagine it's very difficult to paint on that tree when there's so much detail in there. I only want to include the branches and the leaves, so that's not going to work. So what we can do instead is still use that brush, but go to the blend modes at the top of the screen. Now, ordinarily, like I say, it'll be set to normal. But we do have one in there amongst all of them called overlay. Now, if I use overlay, when I now use this brush, it'll only cover the areas that should be white. Okay, it'll paint on areas that are gray if they should be white, and it'll leave everything else alone. So look, I'm going to paint on the tree. Can you see now? Look, I'm painting on the tree, even those real fine, delicate areas on the left-hand side, those little branches, it's covering over. Every time you lift off and press down, it'll kind of double up on the amount that you're kind of brushing on there. But I'm brushing really quite loosely here, going onto the black areas. In fact, look, I'll bring my cursor onto this black area here. Doesn't do a thing, not a thing. It only affects those areas that should be white. So we're going to here, all the gray areas are being turned to white. And on the opposite side of that, if I now change the foreground color to black, so I'm now painting in black, I can actually make sure that the background is black. So there are all these gray areas. Look, if I paint over that, again, very loosely, getting really up close to that tree, but it's not going on to the tree. It's not kind of covering over all those areas I've just painted. An incredibly powerful little bit of technique doing that with this particular brush. This overlay blend mode is an absolute lifesaver when it comes to tidying up your layer masks. So let's just do very, very quickly something like, let's just say we'll do it like that. All right, so that's good. Right, so here we go then. Here's what we've got. It ain't going to be perfect because I'm rushing doing this for you. But let me just put a color underneath it. Let's put a layer underneath. If you want to do a layer directly underneath it, hold down the Command key on Mac or Control key on Windows, and then click to add a layer mask, and that will automatically put one below the layer that you've got. So then we'll fill that with gray. And this is going to kind of make it obvious. Yes, I know it's not looking good in there. All right. But let me just show you a way that you could fix that, because this is kind of like the fringing, the halos that we talked about earlier on when it was going around me. We've got a similar thing here, but you wouldn't be able to use minimum on that because it would get rid of the really small branches and leaves. So one way that you could look at doing this, and it is going to be a bit time consuming, but if this is what you got to do, this is what you got to do. Let's just click on the layer containing the tree. I'll add a layer directly above. And what we'll now do is I'm going to actually add a clipping mask to this layer, because now whatever I do on this layer, I only want it to be visible on the visible parts of the layer below. I don't want it to be visible on the background and the potential new background I put in. I only want what I'm going to do now to be visible on the tree. So I need to add that clipping mask. So what I will do is I'll put my cursor and show you again, just zoom in. Here's the layer I'm going to work on. Here's the tree. I only want what's on here to be visible on this layer. And in fact, the only visible parts of this layer are the white bits. So what I will do is I'm going to put my cursor in between these two layers, and I'm going to hold down the Option key on Mac or Alt key on Windows. And you can see that little icon pops up. Then I click down. Whoops, let's just go back, see if it does it while you zoomed in. It might not. No, it doesn't do it while you zoomed in, but let me just zoom out. There we go. So now you can see, you saw that layer move across. So now whatever I do on this layer will only be visible on that layer below. And what we can do to tidy this kind of fringe in, this blue area here, tidy that up, is I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. All right. So we go to the toolbar, press S and get clone stamp tool. And I'm going to make it really, really small. Let's just zoom in just a little bit. I'll make it small. And I can now sample areas of the tree and brush over these blue areas, which are really their branches. So I'll sample this little bit of green here and then brush, sample there. And you're going to keep wanting to sample continually. As you're working around it, you're always making different samples of the area that you want to clone. So let's come to here, and you can see that it's kind of cloning it and only putting it onto the branches. It's not going up onto the background layer, sorry, the gray background behind it. And that is purely because we've got this clipping mask. Because if I turn that clipping mask off, that's what we've got. If I turn it on, it's only visible on the visible parts of the layer directly below. So that's that. Right. Let's just show you something else. I might come back to that. We'll see about time. But I want to just show you this one main thing here. Don't judge me by this picture. This was a side job I got paid to do a few years ago. And if you're wondering, I've explained this in the book, but the reason the face is blurred out on this image is because this is actually a picture of a guy who's a British actor and didn't get permission from the agent to use it with his face visible. So they just said, blur it out. So there you go. Right. So I've done a cutout so far. Let's just turn that off. You can see here, this is the cutout that I've got so far. That was originally photographed on this gray background, but I've just put this color below him, which is what I would have had, did in the final image. But the part that was really difficult, as you can see from here, was picking up all these fine hairs. It's obviously a wig, but incredibly fine hair. Now, one of the things I've got, I always hear people mentioning, and I used to do it myself, is that when you see selections and cutouts demonstrated by, people who teach Photoshop or maybe Adobe when they've released some new software or new updates to software, they always seem to show cutouts of hair when it's quite a simple background. And you think, well, that's not really showing anything. But what we've got to realize with this is, and it took me a while to realize, is that we cannot expect the impossible from Photoshop. We just can't expect it. We can't expect to be able to get fantastic cutouts of, say, let's say somebody with dark curly hair with lots of fine bits when they're stood against maybe a tree with dark branches and leaves. I mean, you're never going to get it. There's always things that we have to do to fake it, if you like, to kind of make it look as if we did a cutout. And there's lots of ways we can do that, lots of ways. And I've shown ways that we can actually make brushes and paint them in to make it look as if like a grass brush looked like fur. That's in the book as well. But when I was writing the book and I'd literally submitted it the next day, next morning, I was lying in bed. Now, all of a sudden, I had this kind of like hallelujah moment. Comes me thinking, oh, do you know what? There's another way we could do this. And then I had to write that and then send that in as well. So then, thankfully, Rocking Up were able to put it in the book. And it's just some extra little thing that you could maybe contemplate using when you're doing your cutouts. And that's to fake the look of the hair cutouts. Let me show you what I mean. The first thing I'll do is this, just to see if we could maybe get a better cutout on the hair. Is while we're here, let's just dive into select and mask. And I'll change the view to onion skin, which is my favorite view when we're working in here. And you can use the transparency slider to see the background or not see the background or just see it partially. And I'll go to maybe something like that. And then I would use the tools on the left-hand side to maybe try and brush in some of the hair there to pick up the fine hairs. And it kind of looks okay at the moment, but then when you look at maybe the black and white view, you can see it ain't looking good. Do you know what I mean? It's gonna got bits that are visible now through the hair, which should be thick, and it ain't gonna look good. So let's just click OK. And that's what we end up with, and this is a common thing when we're doing cutouts on hair, that we end up getting so far with it, and all of a sudden it just starts to look rubbish. All right, it just doesn't work. So let me show you something else, another technique that you can put into your tool bag that you could possibly call on and just use a little bit to help you out. So this was my thought process, and you're going to learn probably a lot about me now. I thought that maybe we could use somebody else's hair and put that in, but how would we do that? Here's what I did. First of all, I went actually to the file menu and I chose search Adobe stock. And when you go into Adobe stock or any stock agency, it doesn't have to be Adobe. You could even take lots of pictures of people yourself, different hairstyles. I then found lots of pictures of hair that were similar to the pirate's hair. And it's great when you go to these places to find images. You can actually not just put curly hair, you can put curly hair on white. So then it's going to make it even easier to cut it out. Now, the one I found, which I thought would be relevant, would be this one here. So if I just double click on it, I've got it saved in my Creative Cloud library. So this here, I thought, well, that's pretty good. I could maybe use that hair, but obviously the hair color is different. I want to use, maybe if I made a brush and I could just dab that hair onto it, that could maybe work. Here's how we can do it. I'll go to the channels menu. Now, this is just a very simple picture. So we're not going to see horrendous differences really in the channels. But what we want to do now is create a mask from the channels and turn that into a brush. And we're not going to work directly on the channels because that would make the picture go crazy. So we'll just choose one where there's the most contrast between the hair and the background. I think the blue one is the one that works the best. Once I've chosen that one, I'm just going to click and drag it on top of create a new channel icon. So now you can see it says blue copy. Let's just zoom in just so you can see it rather than taking my word for it. There you go. It says blue copy. Let me just rename that. I'll double click on it and we'll call it hair, just so I know which one I'm working on. Now, what I need to do is make the hair completely black and everywhere else white. Okay, so I can just isolate it. So first thing I think I'll do, very simply, get the lasso tool. And I'm going to make a selection going around everywhere except the background. So I'm going to go all around the bits of the hair that I want, all the way around the outside like this. Like that, and we'll come in like there. So that's what we want. Now, that's the bit I do want within there. I don't want everything else. So let's just turn everything else white. What I can do then maybe is go select and select inverse or select the opposite. And then we'll go edit and fill, and we'll choose white. So now that's what we've got just there. So that's looking pretty good. All right, so let's now make it a bit darker. So because it's not pure black there, that's kind of different tones of gray, like that tree was when we work on the layer mask there. So we can do the same thing with this one. We'll get a brush. We'll use a black foreground color. We'll use that overlay blend mode up in the options bar at the top of the screen there. And all I'll do is I'll just brush on the hair. You can see, look, as I'm brushing over the hair, making it really nice and dark, that's not going over the white areas. Now, it might be, in fact, I can just about see it. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. The original background of the person there, that wasn't pure white. I need to change that, actually. Now, rather than me brushing, what I could do is just bring up a levels adjustment. Just bring up levels there. We've got the black point, mid-tones, and white points. If I click on the white point, bring my cursor over and click on an area that isn't white, but I want it to be white. When I click on that, boom, it just turns that, and anywhere else across the image now that was a similar tone turns that white as well. Right, so that's that done. I can now continue painting on the hair to make sure that it's nice and dark, like so. In fact, we'll just brush that away down there as well. All right, so there we go. So really great looking hair, loads of fine hair. This could be brilliant in our picture. So right now, how on earth now do I get this out? Because I want to turn this into a brush. Well, what I'll do is hold down the Command key on Mac, Control key on Windows, and I'll click on the thumbnail of this channel that I've now worked on. And when I do that, you can see it loads it as a selection. I'll then go to, in fact, let's have a look. Yeah, I'll go to the select menu and I'll choose save selection. Now here, where it says destination, I can't do anything on it where it is within this document at the moment. I need to open up in a completely new document so that I can make a brush from it. So where it says document here, I'll actually change it to say new, and I'll put name as hair and then click OK. And you can see now, look, it's opened it up. If I go to the layers, this is a completely different document now. The original one is here. That's the original one. Here is now the one that I can actually make our brush from. So let me just get the crop tool. Let's just trim it down. We don't need all this excess stuff just here, like so. And then we'll go to, whoops. Then we will go to edit, define brush preset. And I'll call this frizzy hair. Like so. So now look, I've got a brush that I can use, and I can use, let's just change the blend mode to normal. Otherwise we're not going to see it at all. I've now got a brush in the shape of that hair. So how am I going to use that in this pirate picture? Well, what I could do, and again, it's just about being subtle, not overdoing it to make it obvious, but this is how you could probably subtly use this. I'm going to put a layer below my pirate cutout. You remember that keyboard shortcut, holding down the Command key or Control key, clicking on the new layer icon, it puts it directly below. Then I'll bring in this brush. And what I can do is actually sample the color of the hair by holding down the Option key on Mac or Alt key on Windows while I'm using a brush, sample the color of the hair. Let's make the brush real small. Like that. You can see where the boundaries of it are coming outside the image just there. I might even rotate it just a little bit. You can come into the brush settings and rotate it just a touch. Let's just have a look about, say, there. Maybe just back a little bit more. Something like that. And what I'll do is I'm just going to dab down. It might work, it might not. Let's have a quick look. Dab down. Whoops, oh no, horrible color. Let's just go for black. And we'll go for, say, there. Now, can you see? I've obviously just used black there, but if I sampled the color of the hair as normal, that hair that I'm putting in there could actually work. If I, see that, I don't know why I'm pointing at my screen here, but can you see this really horrible bit just here? That was the bit I tried to pick up using select and mask, and I just left it there, but you can see how that just doesn't work. But this hair here, look how fine that hair is there. I could even maybe use it on the other side of the head to bring in really fine hair there. Obviously, I could just sample the color of the original hair to then use that on the brush, but it just kind of got me thinking, having that what would happen if attitude of maybe that would work or maybe not. So that's just something I threw in as an extra, not in the main chapter. It was kind of like an afterthought of have a bit of a play with this. see if you can maybe make this work, because there's definitely something to be had with it. Now, the last thing I want to show you, it's kind of selections related. We're not going to get to that. It's kind of selections related, but it's more to do with when selections aren't the way to go. It's all right knowing when to use them, but it's also good to know when not to use them. So let's just say here, and this is actually part of a video which I've had released today on my YouTube channel, but I just want to quickly show you now because it is relevant. Let's just say this picture here, I wanted to share on something like Instagram. Now, the crop at the moment, the aspect ratio wouldn't really fit that square aspect ratio, that 1:1, because let me just grab the crop tool and I'll choose it as a square 1:1. You can see, look, there's no way I'm going to fit our surfer Jack within the picture and make it look good on something like Instagram. So this is what I'm going to do. I will, first of all, come over to the layers panel and click to unlock that layer. Then I'll get my crop tool and I will drag out this 1:1, something like that, this square crop just there. And I'll then hold down the Option key on Mac, Alt key on Windows, and the Shift key, and it will just grow big like that. There we go. All right. So now that we've got that, oh no, I've got content, right. This is the, I've got content aware ticked in the options bar. I had somebody say to me, why don't you just use that? This is why I wouldn't use it. Content aware to fill in those left and right hand sides to make it the square crop doesn't work, because first of all, look at the shadow. The shadow's gone off at a really odd angle. It's kind of moved it. And also in this back part here on the waves, it's got repeating patterns. So maybe for this technique, for this to make this a square crop, using a selection isn't the way to go. There is another way of doing things. So let me show you that one very quickly. We'll get the crop tool again, and I will drag out the different kind of crop like so. In fact, I'll just come down this bottom part as well, and we'll just take that to there. Right, so there's my square. Oh, I've done it again. Let's cancel that. Ignore me just for a minute. Let's wait for that to finish. We know it's not going to work because the content aware does not work with this technique. So we'll go to there and we'll take out the tick of content aware. Right, now let's grab the crop tool last time, and we'll take it to about there, and we'll give it the square crop. Now, I know that I ticked that content aware originally, but what you could do is make a selection of these left and right hand sides and then send it over into the main content aware field dialog to see if it worked, but it doesn't work. So making a selection of those sides is irrelevant. But what you can do is this. We can go to edit content aware scale. And then what, look at this. If I now I've got these handles going around it, if I hold down the Option key on Mac, Alt key on Windows, and I click on the left-hand side here, that means that the right-hand side will grow in the same proportions. But look, click and drag. Look at this. The background is growing, but the subject remains the same proportions. Unbelievable. I absolutely love that. Look at that. The shadow is going the correct way. There's no repeating patterns on that background. I just think that's amazing. When you use this, you can also use, let's have a look here, go edit, content aware scale. At the top of the screen, there is an option that's got this like a human icon. If you click on that, that is called protecting skin tones. Let's just try it. Let's click on it. And now we will click and drag outwards. And clearly it doesn't work. He's now blown up like Augustus Gloop off Willy Wonka, for those who are old enough to remember. So that doesn't work. But just goes to show, experimenting with it. His head and hands and feet are the same, but his body's grown. The skin tone's protected. Maybe that's not the best way to work. So just goes to show you things that you can do with selections. It's a real quick run through when to use them and when not to use them when you're using content aware, so long as you remember not to leave that tick in the top there. But Katie, we're done. I can't believe how quick that went. Well, I can't. You can't. There we go. Let me stop sharing my screen and I'll be back with you. There you go.
Thanks, Glenn. That's great. I really appreciate the cloning the tree brush. That's very pleasing to watch. We do have some questions in the Q&A that have built up. If anybody has questions now after the presentation, please put those in the Q&A. They're a little bit easier to moderate. So I tried to take some notes when these questions came in on what photo we were demonstrating. The first question came in from Susan. Can you only subtract one color point at a time, or can you click multiple times on slight variations in the color within the same subtract operation? I think this was on the surfer.
Oh, that was on the surfer. Now, as it is at the moment, that's a good point, actually. But as I understand it at the moment, Susan, you can only click on it once and then use that slider there to increase or decrease how much you want selected. If you needed to include more of it or a different color, you would then just click on subtract and choose color range again and just keep adding multiple. That's the great thing about this new addition. And bear in mind, this is very fresh into Photoshop. You know, you just literally just go click, add another one, click, add another one. And it takes no time at all. It really doesn't. So as I understand it, it may change if there's a need for it, but you could, each time you do it, it's just for one particular color range. And then you got the slider.
Okay. Harold asks, also on the surfer photo, why would you not do these changes in ACR before you get into Photoshop?
I did. No, I did. Yeah, I did. The only reason I've kind of shown it that particular way was because I wanted to be able to have a layer in Photoshop to show you the before and after. Ordinarily, I would have that DNG, that raw file, opened up straight away in Lightroom, which, you know, the equivalent Camera Raw, and I'd do those things in there. When I originally did this picture, which was before the updates in the recent Adobe Max, I didn't have that option. But now, if I was kind of rewinding time and stupid enough to take a camera into the sea without a waterproof case on, and if I was going to do this picture again, I would do exactly that. I'd be able to do it all in Lightroom before it was even sent anywhere near Photoshop. That's the great thing about it. It's a huge time saver having this kind of stuff now.
The next question is, can you use Camera Raw with iPhone pictures?
Camera, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can, because iPhone pictures, if you're using the Lightroom app, you can choose to shoot in RAW DNG. So when you bring them in, you can open them up. You know, if you've got them in your computer, you can open them up and it'll open them up automatically into Camera Raw. Failing that, you can edit them in the Lightroom app or on Lightroom mobile, Lightroom on the cloud. There's so many different Lightroom versions when you are literally working on a raw file taken with your mobile phone. So yeah, it's going, mobile phone photography is going from kind of like a fun thing to do to becoming quite a serious thing now. There's some incredible artists out there using their mobile phones. Lisa Carney is one in particular. I think you did that with a phone, you know, and the fact that she's able to do so much with it is because she's working on a raw file. So yeah.
Okay. Hal asks, and this is when we transition to the Welsh sheep farmer. When you're clicking down, what are you clicking down on? The layer or the subject?
Good question. It's very difficult to see, obviously, when you're doing a presentation there, but when you've got that object selection, whatever it is, that checkbox in the top there, as you bring your cursor on top of your image, you know, it will literally will just highlight them really quickly to say, oh, that's that one, as you move your cursor over the top of it. So in the example with the actual Welsh farmer himself, when I put my cursor over the top and you saw it covered with that overlay to basically tell you that Adobe Sensei knew that was something, a subject within your thing. If you want then to have that selection active, you would then just tap down with your cursor on top of that Welsh farmer. Or anything else in the picture. If I brought it over the dog would then have that thing on it. If I click down on the dog, it will then get the selection active as well. It is insanely good. It really is. It's not, you know, if it's like I said in the presentation, if this is the first generation, if you like, of this technology, exciting times. I mean, I know there's things like in the future, we're going to be saying, select the hair, select the face, select the jumper, the trousers. It's just going to go on and on and on. And it's great, really. It's not taken away from us as creatives. It's actually given us more time to do the creative stuff. So, you know, I'm all for this technology, but it's never going to be perfect, which is why we need books like the Photoshop Layers and Selections Workshop.
One user did ask, are all of these steps covered in the book? That's from Harvey.
Yeah. Absolutely, they are. Yeah, the obviously the first part when we're looking at the surf and whatever, that's in the PDF that you can get. And you know, we spoke, you know, I spoke with Rocky Nook about selections is one of those things that Adobe have clearly got as a priority to kind of keep developing. So I will do, there's been an update now, and I will be doing an update for the next Adobe Max, which will be 2022. So then there'll be a bigger PDF to download. So if you've got the book, it's going to be, it's kind of future proof, certainly for a while. In fact, the content's in there. There's stuff that we go look at: selective color range, magic wand, all that kind of stuff's explained as well, because it does have its place. There are times, believe it or not, there are times when the magic wand is the best tool to use. It's so yeah, it's kind of future proof. The selections are always going to be there for us to do.
We have time for some more questions. Brian asks about the tree, the Savannah tree. Would you not use the blend to remove the blue around the tree rather than cloning?
Yeah, you could do. However, when you can get so far with that, it then starts to really make those branches even smaller. And the smaller they get crispier. So there's a fine line before, there's a fine line with how far you can push that blend slider before it starts to get really crispy, because then what you've got to do is split that marker up to soften it. And as you soften it, you reduce it so far, you then use that slider to soften it, and it increases it a bit. So it's a real trade-off. You could really play with it. But when you think about how small those are, I mean, what I was showing there was kind of like an extreme example of it, but that cloning technique with the clipping mask has saved me more times than I care to remember. It works brilliantly on hair. It really does work well on hair when you struggle to get the hair. But yeah, it's a fair question, Brian, but it's a fine balance. Do you know what I mean? It's a fine balance. But these kind of things, it's just worth experimenting. If you think, would you do that? Give it a go, see what you think.
Renee asks, with content aware scale, do the pixels get duplicated or just stretched? Asking what effect that would have on the image if you made it larger and then printed it. Okay,
so again, there's a limit to how much you can do with this stuff. But what I can tell you is, with this picture of Jack here, you'll be hard pushed to notice what's actually happened. If I'd shown it you as a square crop made bigger, you'd be like, wow. It can only go so far with it. The fact that Jack wasn't changing his proportions because I'd grown it by, say, that much either side. Now, if I say I wanted to double the width of the whole image, eventually Photoshop's going to go, look, there's only so much I can do with this background. I'm going to have to stretch that bloke in the middle as well now. There's a limit to it. So you can't say it's a hard and fast rule. You can grow so much and it won't affect, or it won't. It's image by image. It's a case by case basis, but it works so much better than content aware fill, which does really just duplicate bits. This tends to do, I don't know how it works. There's some scientists out there that are way cleverer than me, that it kind of just, I don't know how it does it. I don't know how to answer you. It just grows. It just looks real. It's just incredible. I mean, you saw what it did with the shadow. It didn't make it go off a funny angle. It kind of continued it in the right direction. It's just amazing stuff. It really is. So yeah, I get a bit excited, don't I? I do. I love it. I love this stuff.
It's perfect for webinars. We have time for one more question. We don't want to keep Glyn too long. There's one more question on Photo Raw from Michael. Do you always work in Camera Raw instead of Bridge? If so, why?
Not always. However, I don't tend to use Bridge that much, and it's not because I'm saying that Bridge is no good or anything like that. That's not it. The reason is because my workflow, I actually use Lightroom, and Lightroom does what Bridge would do. It kind of organizes my images, and I can kind of select them and bring them into Camera Raw and Photoshop. But that's what I do in Lightroom. Do you know what I mean? Everything's just there. So it's not a case of I don't use it because it's no good. It's just that I don't use it really because it's not part of my workflow.
Right. Well, with that, everybody, I'm going to leave the.
I just had to say hi.
Our publisher is coming on.
I had to say hi to you, Glyn.
Oh, no, it's been ages. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Good to see you.
Looking well. I like this.
It's new.
Yeah. You and Peter Hurley. Peter Hurley's got one now. Who's copying who? That's what I want to know.
That's all right. I won't distract you anymore, Katie. I just wanted to say hi to Glyn. I couldn't listen to him for an hour and not say hello.
Oh, bless. Thank you, mate. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We are saving the chat. We are sending out the recording tomorrow for those of you who had to head out early. Those of you who missed the presentation, it will be emailed. It'll be up on our YouTube. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email me at katie@rockynook.com. Hopefully we got to most of those questions. And thank you so much, Glenn, for all your education, for writing the book with us, and for this webinar.
Not at all. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody else for signing up as well. It's fantastic numbers. We think we'll be zoomed out by now after 2 years, but to see so many signing up is fantastic. So thank you very much. And thank you, Rocky Nook, as well.
All right, take care. Have an excellent day.